Thank you, Mr. Bolarowski. That's interesting saying. During the great toilet paper plague of 2020, we were running low like everyone else. And Tracy went off and decided, you know what, before I go to the grocery store, I better pray about the toilet paper. And you know, it sounds funny, but the ironic thing was, when she and Garrett got to the grocery store, they found 2 packs of toilet paper. One, and they were buried way, way in the back. And they got one for our family, and they gave one to a guy behind us who was also looking for toilet paper. Well, that story, that prayer, that miracle, whether you like to believe it or not, it was a miracle, that really did move me. So when I was at work talking to a co-worker, he came to me and says, Tom, I got to go. I'm out of toilet paper. My 2 daughters need it really badly. I got to go to the store and find it. Well, he was being a good Catholic, I thought. Religious guy, prayer. So I kind of followed my wife's example and said, hey, why don't you pray about it? And then he told me, quote, I don't waste my prayers on something that small. I was flabbergasted. I was absolutely flabbergasted. Actually, I wanted to run because 2 things came to my mind. There was going to be a lightning bolt coming down out of heaven, and I didn't want to be anywhere near, or there was going to be a big core-sized hole in our office space, and I did not want to fall into it. But obviously, I've been thinking about that individual, that co-worker's comment for quite a bit over the last, 8 months now? And, you know, there were some thoughts that have come to my mind or conclusions that I've come to. They're not profound. They're rather simple. But today I'd like to at least share with you a couple of my thoughts, you know, for the what it's worth department. Now, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about that, when he said, I don't waste my prayers on things that simple, is faith begins with the simple things. Now, if you think about it, what's the classic story of people that should have had a lot of faith? Obviously, the Israelites. When they came out of Egypt, they saw plagues galore. They saw the parting of the Red Sea. They saw the parting of the Jordan. They had quail that was, 3 feet tall, 3 feet worth of quail throughout the entire camp because they were requesting food. What did that accomplish? Absolutely zero. And in fact, you would think that it's the dramatic plagues or the dramatic miracles that actually increase your faith. The dramatic miracles actually get your attention, but they're not what holds your attention. Same thing happened in the day of Christ. With Christ around, you had the Son of God. And what were people watching? What were all the disciples watching? Healing after healing after healing. Miracles galore. You know, the fish and the bread, twice. He fed, 5,000 people on 2 separate occasions with just a handful of food. You would think, wow, the Son of God's here, because they knew he was the Son of God. That's going to make my faith solid. But let's turn to John 6. John 6, and we'll just say verse 54. And this was the case where he's talking about eating the bread of life. And Christ says, whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up in the last days. And in verse 60, therefore many of the disciples, when they heard this, said, this is a hard saying. Who can understand it? And in 61, he said, when Christ knew in himself that his disciples complained about this, he said to them, does this offend you? And then we'll jump down to verse 64. 64. But there are some of you who do not believe, for thus Jesus Christ knew from the beginning. Okay, in verse 66, from that time on, Many disciples went back and walked with him no more. And then Jesus said to the 12 disciples in verse 67, "Do you also go away?" But of course the famous saying, Simon Peter answered, "Lord, to where shall we go? You have the words of eternal life." All those miracles, and Christ was giving them some deep things, and they left. You would think these dramatic miracles would increase their faith. But the truth of the matter, it doesn't. It actually doesn't. Do you know what increases your faith? The small things. The small things that happen on a day-to-day. The simple things. So what are the small, simple things? You always have to ask that question. Give you a quick answer. The simple things are usually the things that you don't think about. They're the things that are usually ignored or not paid attention to. So what don't we pay attention to in our normal everyday lives? Hey, we have lots of food around here. Do we really think much about it? We just go to the refrigerator, open it up, and take out whatever you want to eat. We generally all have enough clothes. We go to the gas station, we put gas in our car. Do we think about that kind of stuff? Not necessarily. No, not really. I mean, I don't. It's easy to ignore. But Christ said in Matthew 5, it's the simple things that we really are supposed to pray for. Matthew 5. Whoops, wrong book. Matthew 5 and verse 11. And the interesting thing is, if you're paying attention to the little things, the small things, that's when you see God. But in Matthew 5 and in the model prayer, and I'll jump down to Matthew 5 and verse 11. Oh, wait, I got the wrong one. Sorry. Here, I'm sorry. Matthew 6 and verse 11. I'm sorry, I wrote it down. Give to us this day our daily bread. And what's another one that we don't think about too much, which is one of the small things? And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. So we have a lot of physical things that are small things that we don't think too much about. But what's another one of these things that we don't think too much about? That's one of the small things. How we treat one another. God is in our life in the small things. And I had a couple of verses that I'd like to read that I thought were kind of profound, because God is in the simple things. Psalm 127. Psalm 127 and verse 1. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. In vain for you rise up early and sit up late to eat bread of sorrows, for he gives the beloved sleep. How about another simple thing? Sleep. When you can't sleep, that's awful. That's one of the worst things in the world. You can't pay attention. I had an abscess over here, a number of years ago. In fact, it cropped up. I cracked a tooth. It cropped up. I started feeling it here at church, and it was on President's Day weekend. I tell you what, I couldn't wait for the needle because of the fact that I didn't sleep for 2 days. I mean, it didn't matter how I laid, didn't matter what medication I took, Tylenol, Motrin, none of it worked. I didn't sleep for days. So you want to talk about a simple blessing? How about laying there and take a Sabbath day nap? That's one of the greatest blessings that God actually gives us. These things are small. These things are unglamorous. But for our everyday life, they're important. faith, trusting God that he will provide us with the simple and small things, is actually where the faith begins, because it's day by day. These big miracles that we read, the Red Sea crossing, they're one-time events. How often do they happen? Go back to the Israelites. How often did they see the crossing of the Red Sea, or the parting of the Red Sea? Once. How often did the quail come by? Well, they actually had two issues with the quail, but they were, I don't want to say they were few and far between, but what happened every day? What happened every day? How about the manna? That was a simple thing. How about the cloud and the fire? My brother and I were talking. He says, you look at a sunset. Do you think that going from the cloud during the day to the fire by night, do you think it was like a light switch? I doubt it. God's a very dramatic God, isn't he? And so they saw this dramatic change from this is Tom talking, from the cloud to the fire, like you would see a sunset every night or a sunrise. Simple thing, every single day. Now here I do want to go to the book of Nehemiah and demonstrate another simple thing that the poor Israelites, missed out on completely. Nehemiah chapter 9 and in verse 20, and this is Nehemiah talking to the remnant of Israel, or remnant of Judah, excuse me. And you also gave your good spirit to instruct them, and did not withhold your manna from their mouth, small thing, simple thing, daily, and gave them water for their thirst. 40 years you sustained them in the wilderness. They lacked nothing. Their clothes did not wear out, and their feet did not swell. And there's a companion scriptures in Deuteronomy 29:5 and in Deuteronomy 8 verse 4. And the funny thing, now that my boys are getting older, I really don't think about their shoes. They don't wear out as much, but when they were young, it seemed like every other week they said, "Dad, my shoes hurt." Or, "Dad, my shoes are falling apart because I just wore them out." And it was I don't think about it anymore. But they don't wear out. They missed it. They missed the simple thing. Well, that kind of also relates to the second thing that came to mind about the simple things. The simple things. First, the second thing was personal character is defined by the simple actions in your life. It's not the big dramatic offense like adopting or sponsoring children from a foreign country, which are good things. I'm not arguing that. I'm not complaining. But it's what you do on a day-to-day basis. The Air Force has a series of mottos, and one of which is, and they're trying to get everybody in the Air Force to be moral and do the right thing. And one of them is, do the right thing when no one is looking. If you think about it, that does apply to, actually, I was going to ask that as a question. Let's rephrase that. Thinking about that, what defines a good relationship? We have answers to all of that. Good communication. I'm going to buy my wife a really great anniversary present, taking her off on vacation. Trust. Those are all good things, but what is it? What's the key? The key is simple. It's the good things you do at home on a day-to-day basis when no one is looking. Tracy and I will watch movies, and when we watch a movie about, some family or a couple of some sort or another, there was a movie that just came out, I guess it won the Academy Award or one of them last year. I don't remember the name of it, but the whole movie was about a couple. They started out great, madly in love, and then they ended up going through, and we watched the divorce process. I'll tell you what, I was exhausted when it was all over and done. I was burned out. And the question came up, Why can't they have a good movie about a great married couple? I will tell you why. Because it's boring to watch. It's simple. It's peaceful. There is no drama. So the matter is, in a relationship, it's the simple things you do at home, the kindnesses that you do to one another behind closed doors when no one is looking. In a similar vein, I worked with a guy, didn't have too much respect for him, but he did tell me one day, you know, if you don't get audited by the IRS, you're paying too much in taxes. And I was flabbergasted. You know what that was telling me? He cheats on his taxes every year, and he's banking on the fact that he won't get caught. Is that doing what's right when no one is looking? I did a quick Google, by the way, on debt. And it turns out from an article I found in April 7, 2020, that there are 43 million Americans carrying education or student loans. And according to the Department of Education, 20% have defaulted on their loans. And they define a defaulted loan as loans that are not paid, that have not been paid on in almost, well, they say 270 days, but that's like 9 months, basically almost 1 year. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now, I understand. There are probably some hard case situations, lack of job, but I bet you they're not. But anyway, cheating on taxes, who's going to look? You're going to bank on the fact that the IRS has so many other people to look at, maybe they'll ignore me. But Christ brought this whole principle up in Luke 16, in parables. Parable of the talents in Luke 16. Luke 16 and in verse 10. He says, very famous scripture, he who is faithful in what is least, it is also faithful in much. And he who is also unjust in what is least is also unjust in much. So what is that telling you? How are you when it comes to the little things? The little things that define your character. And you know, when I was reading through the book of Deuteronomy, I also saw another one. What's one of the famous things that, well, actually my kids would say it. I think all kids have said this throughout the years growing up. We all have. You know, we have that expression. You've heard that expression. Everybody's used it. Finders keepers. That's not true. Deuteronomy 22. Deuteronomy 22 and verse 1. You shall not see your brother's ox or his sheep go astray and hide yourself from them. You shall certainly bring them back to your brother. And you shall do the same with his donkey. You shall do the same with his garment and with any lost thing of your brother which has lost and you have found. You shall do likewise. You must not hide yourselves. There's no such thing as finders keepers. You know what finders keepers is? Stealing. Stealing. And in verse 4, you shall not see your brother's donkey or his oxen fall down by the road. Oh, here we go. In verse 3, you shall do the same for his donkey, blah, blah. In verse 4, you shall not see your brother's donkey or his ox fall down along the road and hide yourself from him. You shall surely help him lift them up again. The little thing. Your brother needs help? Help him. It's how we treat each other. So, was toilet paper a big deal? At the moment, yeah, it was. But in the scheme of things, toilet paper is a very, very small thing. So was my coworker wrong? Absolutely. So what's the takeaway about? What's the takeaway on this? The takeaway for me has always been, our character and our relationship with God is defined by the small stuff, the things that we tend to ignore or overlook. After all, the majority of our life is spent dealing with the small stuff. You know, I was discussing this with a friend, and he actually he phrased this whole thing very, very well. He says, faith in God and our personal character begins with toilet paper.